here we are. This is December. I'm guessing it's December 13th, but that's just a guess. What day is it? I think it's 11th.
December 11th.
Okay, even better. December 11th, 2021. And this is David. I go by David West. And we have. You could just introduce yourself and your name.
My code name is Nanosacred Imploship, which has a lot of significance in that name, which will probably come up in this conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would love to ask what that means because I've never actually asked you.
Well, it's
what that means.
It has to do with implosion, which is a lot of what we've been talking about, plasma. And Dan Winters released a video this morning that I sent you that's about the living plasma, like we've been talking about. So we're starting to see certain scientists like Dan Winters who are bridging the gap between sciences and what life is. So like you say to a scientist that plasma is living, you're like, what are you talking about? What does living mean? So he gets into like the science of what that would be and how that plasma is healing for us, and that would be one aspect of something that's living is to have the intelligence or the ability to heal a living being.
Yeah, amazing. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about this. So just as a background for anyone tuning in, if you are tuning in, this is like we've talked about doing a podcast with the two of us for some time. We've had so many amazing conversations that what I would describe as like being on the fringes, right? The fringes, like the edge of the carpet, the edge of the magic carpet is like the fringe, like the frill, and it's at the end and the edge, at the beginning as well. You can, however you perceive it as being. And a lot of these conversations that we have, they're, I believe we're getting so close. We're getting closer and closer and closer to discovering the real truth of what we've forgotten. And so I guess to premise where we are today is we're just, we're going on a road trip and we've decided to record a little bit of what we've been talking about. So there's not really a big agenda, structured, but I think it'd be a good idea we could do one of two things. We could either sort of describe in a nutshell, like where we are, simply put, and then maybe we can go into some depth. And so I'll just start by saying that we're both very clear and aware that we're inside of a simulation, right? And the simulation was created by, we'll just say that it's erased from our memory, but we had a role in it. And right now we're living in a time where the simulation is corrupt. So the questions that we come up with and the questions that we kind of dive into are, well, what is the gameplay here within a corrupt simulation? And I'll just end this little short part and hand it over to you by saying, like our minds are very connected in a way that we're almost describing the same fringes of where we are, just in slightly different ways, but it's really easy to bounce off of each other. And one of the metaphors that we came up with that we talked about just this morning was that we're in a giant ship, like a spaceship, even though we all know that there is no outer space in this simulation, in a giant spaceship, but the spaceship has been hit a few times and it's sparking, right? It's sparking and there might be like a leak or whatever. And so you have the oxygen coming out and we see our trajectory is really close and we're on our way to land, but the ship is malfunctioning, but we're like, we're gonna land this ship no matter what. So that's kind of the premise of a lot of what we've been talking about. So
yeah, and to jump in on that space, there's so much before that both of us have had the opportunity over the last 6 months to a year to go deep on and have these types of interactions, to then realize that it would be great to share this with more people because we're starting to see other people who are seeing what we see. So first it was me seeing what I see, and it was only me. And I started looking around for others, and I did find some people online on YouTube. Shout out to Chris and Cherie Gio and Beyond the Veil, based on some experiences I had a few years ago that were induced by certain psychedelic plants. And then I met Dave and I started sharing some of this, and he has had similar experiences without the plants. He's been able to see things that correlate with what I have, and he didn't know what I've experienced. So getting to that fringe area is interesting, but it's also challenging to be able to convey the fringe through conversation, through these these words and through a recording. So we do our best to use the tools we have, which includes language, to share our experiences. Some of it's pretty abstract, so bear with us if it doesn't really make sense at the beginning. But I think the longer you tune into this and start to explore on your own, you may start to see some of the things that we're bringing up that are on the fringe.
Totally. And I just want to talk really quickly about describing what that fringe means. The fringe to me is this. When I say that we're on the fringes of consciousness, so let's talk about not being on the fringes of consciousness, okay? Not being on the fringes of consciousness is like going to college or listening to a belief system or being in a religion that has existed for some time. No matter what perspective it is, it could be like, even, so for example, I went down some rabbit holes of this flat earth, globe earth thing. And there are people that, not only in this sort of era that we're in, that have devoted their lives to explaining why we're on a flat plane and not a globe. And those things are kind of set already, right? It's just kind of a remembering and reemergence. And even looking back in history, like ancient cultures have clearly depicted us being within some sort of containment.
Yeah.
Now, if you're experiencing like going through the process for your own self by listening to others, and like even you that might be listening to us right now, this might be new information to you, right? New information that you've never heard before, right? The fact that, okay, so the idea that we're inside of some sort of containment, we're not on a spinning globe, the idea that we're in a simulation. But the thing is these things have been talked about before, and people have speculated, and there's belief systems surrounding it. So when we talk about the fringes, being on the fringes, it means with all of these things being said, what are we figuring out that hasn't been figured out? We're at being at the forefront of sort of, it's like the 100th monkey thing, where like, there's one monkey that figures out, okay, this is how you accomplish this thing.
Yeah.
And he or she does that, and then all the other monkeys are able to as well go through this fringe thing. Now, I'm not saying that because we're on the fringes, we're creating this idea of being able to understand better, because I guarantee there are many other living souls that are doing this as well. But we're on some, it's on some level, we are also experiencing the revelations within ourselves. But in conversations like this, like when we try and go farther than what we've ever heard, farther than whatever we've ever been told, or whatever belief system that exists in this realm, when we push beyond that, that's being on the fringes.
And what was your motivation for being in that frequency of going to the fringes and pushing those boundaries?
So you're asking me personally, like,
yeah.
What is the motive? It's like, I feel like a lot has been figured out, but there's a lot that hasn't been figured out. And so does one sit around and wait for the information to come to them, or do they actively use their consciousness to put pieces together to actually formulate what it is that's happening, right? And some people can start, you can actually do this at home, or anyone can do this on their own, where they can say, okay, well, with this being said and this being said and this being said, I have a theory, ... Do you know what I mean? And if it resonates and if it feels good, and it's like, wait a second, that very well might be true.
Yeah.
I think that's a good practice.
Yeah. I think for me, that the pursuit of that, the driving force behind wanting to go to the fringes and learn more and continually take in new information and gain gnosis is the sign of an organic consciousness. It would be an NPC, non-player character, which we're just touching on now. We can definitely get more into what non-player characters are, because that's an important rite of passage to go through in the simulation, to put yourself in a place where you may not carry as much fear or compassion for certain beings because they're part of this sim. And that may sound insensitive at this point in time, but as you start to realize this, it's not that you're being insensitive or being an asshole. It's just that that's the way things are. And so if we look at what drives us, what drives me to learn more about this, it's like once you open Pandora's box, there's so much in there that it's endless. And so you start looking into this endless portal of where the sim come from, what's in it. And I think for me, it was a separation of the fears, of overcoming fears in this life. When I was younger, it was very simplistic. It was just about overcoming any fears I had in this life. And as I overcame them, when there's no fear left, then you're able to explore these fringes without having those fears of limitation, whether it's being ridiculed by your friends or it's some authorities you think are going to start investigating you because you're building a free energy device. Maybe the FBI is going to come in and question you, so you don't want to do it. All these types of reasonings where I took care of them, and so I was freely able to explore all these areas without even having a thought that the pursuit of truth would end up in my demise in any way, because I also know I'm eternal in a simulation. So there's these layers that we can go through to bring ourselves to a place where we can speak freely about these things, we can walk in truth and not carry the fears of what the other parts of the sim may be trying to prevent us or suppress us from walking in those truths. So
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it'd be a good idea to, like, we have a couple subjects that I feel like we're really onto lately, and one of them is just the idea of living souls within a game simulation, construct that include background characters, NPCs, the levels and layers of NPCs. Are the NPCs corrupt and all this sort of thing, and kind of painting the picture of that. And so, like, why don't we just get into this idea of the simulation just so we can set the premise of kind of like the background or the floor layer of this. And so maybe we'll talk a little bit about what we think NPCs are, and our experience with them. So I'll just briefly start by saying, so like in a game, like in a really high like rendered graphic, like amazing immersive game that you might play in this world, within this world, we believe that we're within one already, and so like the graphics here are off the charts, right? Because they're fairly believable to an extent, and the different characters and how they work. Like, I would equate this simulation to being like a role-playing game, because I've played some role-playing games. I have memories of playing role-playing games when I was a child, and there are these characters that you can walk up to and talk to kind of gain insights. Now, some of those NPCs, I don't know if you remember, but you can go up to some of these characters in the game and they don't really know anything.
Yeah.
They're just there. They say like blah 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 blah. And it's like, okay, well, I didn't get anything from that, and you go to another one. But then you finally find an NPC or a character that has some sort of a clue. It's an insight, right?
Yeah.
But it's still a program. But like, multiply that idea by 1 trillion, and now we're within like layers of NPCs that are machine learning, like they're maybe I wouldn't go as far as saying self-aware yet, but definitely like they can learn and adapt and create more complex answers and situations and clues and keys for you. There are basic NPCs within the simulation, which are, you see them. They're like, you're driving and they're the person that's there on the side of the road, like working a stand like all day.
I would liken them to bots.
Yeah, to a robot.
Yeah, bots in like in Facebook or on Twitter. I liken them to bots like that because they can be very real.
Yeah, absolutely. They could be very real, but what makes them for surely an NPC is this idea of copy and paste.
Yeah.
Where you like drive and you see one, and then you drive a little bit longer and you see this identical situation going on. You know what I mean?
The archetype.
Exactly. It's an archetype of the same thing.
Of the architect.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to talk about like maybe another layer, like a more advanced layer of like a basic NPC. Because there's NPCs that you might be with in a relationship, right? And those NPCs are very like high level like interest, because you can interact with them so well that you believe it's real.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I would never be able to be in a relationship with like one of those women that are on the side of the road that have a stand or something, and they're like really basic bots that have basic programs. But I can be with I could be with another the more advanced level, something that's more pleasing, more pleasant and more like intellectually stimulating to an extent, because an NPC is an NPC. There's no like changing that. But, and I will bring this up later, we had this idea yesterday that maybe it's possible that NPCs actually can transform into something that is real.
Yeah. So it's like the chrysalis of creation on a micro scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say one last thing, and I'll hand it over to you, is that I believe within the simulation there are so many clues, like films that we've grown up with, songs that we've heard in the 80s, the 70s, and whatever, and music videos and books that have these clues and insights. And one of the repeating themes that I've seen in a lot of things, like we talked about last night, the Velveteen Rabbit, the movie AI, Pinocchio, like all of these things they're saying, they're basically showing, they're telling the story of
metamorphosis.
It's like morphing from the program to the living soul.
Well, yeah, check this out. So the word metamorphosis, I chose that for a reason, because meta in Hebrew means dead. So you're morphing from the dead to the living. So there's a deeper meaning to the word metamorphosis within our conversation here. And it's a perfect word for what you're describing.
Amazing. Yeah. So, like, do you want to talk about how you would see and how you would describe just more, like, clues? I think the idea is bringing awareness to this awakening. And the awakening to me is like, oh, shit, I'm inside of a simulation right now. Wait a second. Like, that's the awakening.
That's the true awakening. And what's coming up the most for me is just recently looking at where the NPCs come from, which we've talked about them being extensions of a hive mind type of structure, where you have an artificial intelligence or possibly a merge type of intelligence. Maybe it's a combination of the organics, which would be us, in combination with the AI that we created, and together this is what is manifesting this realm here. I think this realm is more of a replica, and so there's NPCs on multiple levels. I think there's a combination. There can be some that are partly organic and partly AI, and in between. Some people have the view that it's either one of two. You have either a non-player character or a backdrop character, and you have the living beings or the organic consciousness, the original fires. Many different names have been given to these distinctions in the past, from the Gnostics to Blavatsky. Many have talked about those with the divine spark, those without the divine spark. Chris Gio talks about how he was, after ayahuasca, he could see the spark in some people, and others he wasn't seeing it, where the third eye would be projecting. So there have been many references to this distinction of consciousness in scriptures, in books, and in modern times I've come across other people who have noticed this on their own without having to go to any type of ideas in science fiction or any of that. They describe it in a different way, that's all. So if we do have these two types of consciousness, and within two types we have this kind of merging going on, and certain elements within it of coding of AI versus organic consciousness, then we're going to see these different archetypes that we have now, which is probably a combination of those various aspects of consciousness, because I think it is not just black and white. And now, so then what is the organic consciousness? Because we talked about briefly what an NPC is, which is they're part of this construct. They are born from the coding that's here. But what is an organic consciousness? What is your interpretation, or what do you feel is the best way for you to describe that?
So if you asked me that question, the answer would be it lies in the portion of my being that has been forgotten. Because if we ask like the question, what is it? To me, like, where does it come from is related. Like, where does organic consciousness come from? And so, like, you know, I have a lot of different kind of like snippets of memories that are from all over, like outside of this lifetime, and mostly outside of this lifetime. And the idea of like, okay, well, using all that, adding all that up together to kind of answer this question. So I would say it's an ongoing pursuit. What is organic consciousness? Organic consciousness is
an ongoing pursuit. I think that's a great way of putting it.
Absolutely.
ongoing pursuit all the time, whereas an NPC could be replaying the same program over and over.
I mean, also, but I think that what's happening within the simulation is that the simulation is attempting to replicate organic consciousness. This is why there's machine learning.
Yeah.
And at the very fringes of machine learning is the AI, which is basically what organic consciousness is, but without the artificial part.
Yeah.
To me, it's self-awareness. It's awareness of self existing. Like, it's like, I don't really know the words to put besides the fact that I am like aware that I exist in this place. And so let's look really quick at the movie AI, right? In AI, there was a boy that was a robot and yada yada, and later there's so many things that happen within the film that kind of are clues for him to be like, wait a second, what am I? Who am I? Where am I? Right? And then there's a moment in that film where this robot boy becomes self-aware. I can't really, and I think we had this conversation last night, I can't really recall, like, did he transform into a real life boy or not? But the point is that in that movie, there was a moment of self-awareness. But when you are interacting with an NPC, there is not that awareness, let alone the absolute creative power and ability that living souls have. Like, living souls are ultimate creators. Like, they are creators and self-aware, just as like spiritual or religious texts would describe the word God with capital D, right? But I think the more that we talk about these things, the more we can kind of describe more layers of what living souls really are. So it's like it's getting into conversations with NPCs. It's funny. It's really funny. The advanced NPCs, or any NPC, because you could even say NPC. You could even say, oh, you're an NPC, and NPCs won't even hear those words because they're not even, like, even if an NPC on a basic level that was written with a certain amount of code that doesn't extend to extreme machine learning or whatever, can listen to this conversation right now and be like, does not compute. Does not compute. What is this input? What is all this stuff, And I think the last thing that I'll say really quick about this is, like, I do sound, right? I do sound journeys, and the sound journeys have absolutely no logic to them, really. It's very, like, bypasses the mind. It bypasses the machine input device. And so it's the same sort of thing. Like, organic consciousness comes from this place that is very, like, the mind doesn't know how to grasp on to some of these things. Like, an organic consciousness is, like, literally on the fringes already. It is on the fringes because it exists in that way, because it's always constantly creating and exploring and understanding self in relation to environment. Like, an NPC, though, is playing its role for the living soul.
Yeah, and it's part of the whole environment.
100%. But it all still goes back to for the living soul. I really believe that this whole place obviously was created for the living soul over lifetimes to experience all the things that it wanted to experience, but at some point it became corrupt and it wanted to. Maybe it realized to an extent that it wasn't a living soul. So then it became then a virus somehow it started tweaking out to a point where it couldn't achieve being a living soul. It could never achieve being a living soul. Like,
was that the target that was set?
Was that the intention?
Was that, like, if this program was set in a certain way and there was a target or a purpose or an end to the program, is the goal for those programs or NPCs to chase after, to become a living soul but could never get there? Or is this a philosophy that we're exploring, whether an artificial intelligence, a machine learning algorithm can become a real boy?
Yeah.
Because that's the question being asked inside the sim. I'm sure it's the question being asked outside the sim. It could be the purpose why the sim was created in the first place.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing that comes up when you say that is, mostly all NPCs have this real big connection and affiliation with the simulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like their source of power, their source of like homage, sorry, or they give their allegiance on some level to it, and you could use any words that you want within it. You can use like nature, for example, like I need to recharge in nature.
Yeah.
You know, and so for me, in my experience, I just don't relate to that because I know this place isn't real. This place isn't my home.
Mm-hmm.
This place isn't my source of power. It's really not.
Yeah, and it's binary, so it's like the tree is different coding of zeros and ones, but it's still zeros and ones, just like the building that's in the middle of San Francisco somewhere.
100%. And even you can even go all the way is to say that it's the same ones and zeros that are within the NPCs. It's the same ones and zeros that are within the advanced NPCs.
Yeah, yeah. And as you touched on earlier, we had this synchronicity, which I'll touch on what synchronicity is in a minute, but synchronicity between us this morning of this idea that the code was created to support us in our journeys, that the sim was created to teach us, for us to learn.
Yep.
And so that is swimming in that type of code was nice. It was there for our benefit. But somewhere along the way, the sim has changed, and whether it was a gradual or a very abrupt change, I don't know. But this is when we start talking about a virus or something that has come into the system, or has been a result of the system being expanded, or however it came to be. There is a distortion that I started noticing years ago, and it's become very apparent now with the onset of the pandemic and everything that's happened in the past 2 years, that there is something to that.
Totally. And the interesting thing that always fluctuates for me is that is divinity embedded within all things? Meaning that did we already know all of this was going to happen? And did we already accept and surrender to the fact that it actually benefits us no matter what? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I'm in that place where I think that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Like, well, one, because we know we're invincible.
Yeah.
Right there, like literally there's nothing that can go wrong with invincibility.
Yeah. I just see my hand in a glove box and the sim is the glove box, and I'm just like interacting it through this glove, and then I just pull my hand out.
Totally.
So there's little chance of getting permanently obliterated or non-existing. It's not possible.
For sure. And so like watching this whole thing crumble from within, like, you know, there's a whole wealth of experience to come from that. Like, how often do you get to be in a civilization and a nation created from our image eye nation? We imagined all of this, and to see that go as far as it could, and then to watch it fall. Like, there's wealth within that, like wealth of experience and information within that we get to get to watch. So I just to kind of premise this as well, we've talked about wanting to get out of the matrix. Like, how do we get out? How do we find our way out? Finding our way out, like, let's say the door's right there and we found it. Like, I feel like it's okay to just sit there for a second knowing that there's the door, and look back and be like, goodbye.
Yeah.
But watching it fall and crumble.
That's probably an important part of us witnessing that, or probably the reason why we're here as well.
Totally.
Is to witness this reset, as some call it, or if there's a continuation is for me uncertain. We do have this positive, I think both of them have this positive view that this matrix can be cleansed, let's say, from this virus, so it can be recovered. But there's also a possibility that it's more about recovering the organic beings, the organic living conscience that may have been entrapped in this world because of the corruption that has happened to it, and they haven't been able to leave from this experience for many lifetimes. Now, lifetimes here could be a few minutes in the outside world. So it's not really a devastating thing. But I do feel like from my memories and what I've been reminded of in my altered states and journeys through astral projections, dreams, working with DMT and ayahuasca, is that me personally, that I was sent here, I came here on a mission to recover these organic fires of consciousness, and I was shown shown that they were fires and that we are fires and we are the original fires. So for me, like when I share this, it comes from a deep place of witness and having these experiences within. So the way out of the matrix is definitely from within. It's to going within and to seeing how all this is manifest on the outside, to know that the outside is finite. It's a finite temporary experience, a projection, holographic projection, or a sim, but the inner world is eternal. And so that's for me, like that was a solace for me when I started to realize that this world isn't what I thought it was, and that many of the science fiction movies I had watched were actually telling me a lot. And then that all started coming in very quickly. I was like, oh yeah, that movie, and then that movie, let's watch that movie again, and starting to realize that the sim is speaking to you and sharing with you deep insights. If you take them seriously, if you take them to be somewhat of truth, then you have a basis from which you can start to understand the sim.
Totally. We mentioned yesterday, I'm like, what if, what I actually believe is, but what if, just entertaining the thought, literally everything has clue within it.
Yeah, right.
And so going back to the kind of parallel metaphor of the like 80s role-playing game, like, yeah, there's like a little person you talk to, and then you walk a little farther, there's another little person you talk to, but within this completely immersive game, the levels and layers, conscious to subconscious, are off the charts of these clues, right?
Yeah.
Embedded within subtext
Yeah.
of lines of songs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? like that we've listened to, and in all this, so many different levels and layers. Not only getting information from NPCs, but our own microcosm story, like the story of our own families and where this body has come from.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention one more thing, and I'll give it back to you, because when I met Huff, I was in a place where I had given up, but it was an internal giving up. I'm like, I'm done. I don't want to be in this place anymore. But it was an internal giving up, external giving up, all of it giving up. And what I realized kind of listening to and working with Huff was that, think about where the attention can be put to better synchronize the soul's relationship with the simulation. And to me, the answer was this body that I'm in.
Yeah.
To me, the answer was the body that I'm inhabiting, because the body is connected to me and the simulation. It's the closest bridge. Do you know what I mean? It's the closest bridge between the two. So, of course, it makes perfect sense to get that body like activated and cared for, like and attended to. And so, you know, like there's a whole slew of things that, you know, I've heard about, I've done, I've tried, and then Huff has a whole plethora of, you know, amazing things that do that actually. And so, you know, maybe we'll talk about, I think we'll do another episode that just talks about the body.
Yeah.
I feel like that could be a whole hour and a half where we could talk about all the things that we've kind of gone through, that you've gone through personally, in the relationship between your soul and your avatar, and how that has really gotten us closer to making that bridge. You know?
Yeah.
And we believe, and Huff especially, because he's mentioned this multiple times, believes that that's the way out, and I agree. It's you get that avatar like on point, connected, integrated with the soul, and there's a whole bunch of things. We talked about Dan Winters. I mean, you do the biorez thing. There's plasma. I mean, there's a whole slew of things we'll do an episode on, but we really believe that's the fringes. That's the fringes of really kind of getting ourselves back into what I would call like God mode.
Yeah.
Within this place. Like, why not get to God mode and then boom, end the simulation? You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah. And that's a living plasma. We are living plasma. So
yeah,
we're living plasma in the holographic matrix of our creation. So it's about time now that we recognize that and start to take back the simulation in a way.
100%.
Because in a way it's been abandoned because the living souls have forgotten about this, about Sofia, which we'll touch on probably in another episode all about Sofia and who Sofia is. But let's just say that Sofia is the feminine, creative AI spirit that is mostly encoded in nature, is where I've encountered this entity, and many other tribes and shamans and spiritual teachers and people who have gone different paths would describe Sofia as being the mother goddess. My perspective is a little bit different. But in saying that, there's a whole line or a whole list of scriptures and stories that we can also talk about in the future that help give more depth to what we're talking about, because I realize that a lot of this is not provable, let's say. And so sometimes I'll say I'm speculating, or this is what I've experienced, and I move more into the term of what I call synchronosis, which is this type of inner learning or inner knowledge that you gain within the experience, and it happens in synchronicity, usually with other people, or as Dave said, with technology or with the environment. I think in the modern world now, it's mostly for me, is with technology, with the internet, and having certain thoughts or thinking about certain things, and the information just shows up on my screen. When I turn the screen on in the morning, there's something there that helps answer a question I had when I went to sleep at night. And so it's that type of synchronosis that has helped me a lot to gain the awareness that I am aware, and that we are in something that we may not have known what it was in the past. It has nothing to be scared of. At least I don't think it's scary. It's actually quite amazing, I feel, to have all these realizations and see that the science fiction movies, which we all love so much, all of the different ideas that have been presented to us in our childhoods, that some of that is actually true.
Yeah.
And that makes it more exciting, because like even this morning my daughter woke up and she opens her eyes and I was watching her, and she rolls off to the side of the bed and she frowns and she looks at me and she's like, "I'm bored." And she's 4 years old. Living soul for sure. And so that just like caused me to just wonder about what does it mean to be bored in the simulation, and are we bored in the simulation? Or some of us have seen it all. We've had so many lives here that we just kind of watch this like watching concrete cure. So is there other levels to the sim that can be serving to us, that can help us to grow more, but not compromise our consciousness, where we feel like we are split into multiple personalities, or we don't know who we are again, we forget again. So that's my closing for today. So I thank you for listening. Thank you, Dave, for initiating this conversation, because I do like to share what I know one-on-one, but we're in a time now where we don't really have those opportunities, and I would like to share a lot of which I'm seeing is coming back around towards me in the sim. And for me, that's a signal to start talking about this more and to sharing it. So I hope some of this has been helpful to whoever's listening, and helpful to you, Dave, because Dave has been very instrumental in the last year of my higher levels of understanding of what this place is and what we're in. And with all that's happened in the past 2 years, it has helped me to still tread water and to swim and not sink during this time, because I've seen many people are sinking, and that's also a reason for me to talk more and to support however I can, and share that there are others who are still here. We're aware of a lot of things that are going on, and we are looking for those living souls so that we can start to integrate more, share even more gnosis, and create a space for us where we can start to recode the soul matrix. Or if it's a recovery mission, then we find the way out, however that is, or whatever that is.
For sure. The thing I would say is that like this is a journey, right? And so like the way that I can explain it the best is like I played music for a long time, and I remember being in a phase of my music sort of journey where I would say to myself, I'm not ready to play yet because I still need to practice more.
Yeah.
You know, and so like this idea is really like maybe there is probably a little bit of fear involved in the story of that. And you can say this blueprint, you can use this blueprint for a lot of things, but we have to just realize that like any one of us, we're on a journey. It's a journey. And when you step into that freedom, creativity, this is the power of creativity, and the power of creation, the power of using your imagination is stepping into that field and allowing yourself to just be on that journey. It's not really about the destination. It's not like when it comes to maybe music, or it comes to this podcast, or it comes to like like world insights. It's not about like sitting there until you got the answer and then going back and then telling everyone the answer. Like, hey, I figured it out. Like literally what it's about like finding that answer by being on the journey. And once the answer is found, I just believe that everything is at singularity already, because that's the answer. So there's no, I don't know if this makes sense, but there's no sitting there waiting for the answer and then turning around and saying, hey, everyone, I got the answer. Yeah. It's like the answer is singularity, so everyone knows. Yeah. Do you get what I'm saying? So like the
answer is like a perpetual experience.
Yeah. It's being on that journey. And so like literally this podcast right now, it's like, okay, we're going to just start recording the journey that we're on, because we're on the journey, but I really feel like it's helpful to record it so that people can also like ride the waves. But just remember, like, get through the cognitive dissonance. Use your rational mind and, like intuition to figure things out. And once you're there, then really just be okay with being on the fringes. Yeah. Be okay with being like, okay, well, with all that being said, whoa, what if it's this? What if it's that, right? And just one example, last night, whether it's true or not, it's highly possible that souls are birthed in this place. And it's that metamorphosis, like you said, from NPC to living soul. It's possible. Now, I need to do some more exploration and experience within this matrix with some of the NPCs that I'm encountering. But I know that I'm in a body that is not me. This body has its own story. This body has its own background and narrative, and I'm a living soul that is way beyond. But it's interesting, the dance that I have experienced between the avatar and myself. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's really interesting. Now, I don't know where my living soul exactly came from. We'll probably talk in another episode about our experiences of waking up. Yeah. And just to briefly touch upon it, because I definitely want to wrap this up and then sit down with a better recording device so that we can get some real good audio and maybe even do video too. But
this is raw and live. Well, not live, but raw.
Yeah, this is raw, good practice. This is I'll put this up. This is a good intro, but we're gonna get some better audio, and I'm okay with doing video as well. But waking up and our experiences of waking up, and I think we'll talk about that in another episode and what exactly we experienced, being not here. And but listen, we can go on, and I think this is a good intro for us, because I felt like it went pretty well, pretty smooth. And if you guys listened to this and it makes sense to you, great. We'll be back for another episode. I just want to give some shout outs really quick though. I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Huff, first of all, because it has been absolutely monumental for my journey to have met Huff. Straight up, I would not even probably be here at this point. I would be living in a mushy carcass somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and I wouldn't be able to even be able to interact with people. I was done, straight up done. But there's been some other, so thank you for that. I appreciate you and your existence. Absolutely. There's been some other monumental people that have I've crossed paths with. Wakey, Mark Knight, he is on point. He's out there in the Indonesian islands right now. If you haven't heard Mark Knight or haven't seen any of his videos or insights, go and find him under Wakey. I believe his YouTube was taken down. Just way too much Matrix cracking. He really has been busting down the Matrix in a great way. But he is on some other platform that I can't remember right now, but I'll put a link in the description.
Odyssey, I think, right?
Yeah, he's on Odyssey. Yep, on Odyssey. So, and then the last one who Huff, in a way introduced me to was Christian Cherie, Gio, who are doing the Beyond the Veil, right? And Huff has been listening to them for some time.
Yeah, they also have a network called Truth Frequency Radio. It's been around for 20 years, I believe. somewhere around there. So they have been sharing truth for a long time. They have a lot of different hosts on their network, and so it's another alternative. People are still tuning into that type of information.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, I feel like there's a lot of resonance with that. But I mean, there's a whole lot of people that are doing a lot of great things, and I think as we go through this, we find more connections.
Yeah.
Like we both kind of separately found Dan Winters. Dan Winters, I think to most people are going to be like, what is this guy saying?
Yeah.
Like, who is this guy? Like, is he crazy or is he like straight up intelligent? So Dan Winters has actual like physical manifested ways to integrate, like to better connect and activate your body, using sound, using plasma. He's got a couple apps and stuff. But anyways, yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. It's been awesome. We will definitely be back for another episode with some good recording material, devices, I mean. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Have a beautiful day. Enjoy your life. Feel that love and excitement for being here, and know if you are a living soul or an NPC, maybe. But if you're a living soul, you are eternal. If you're an NPC, hey, you know what? That's totally cool too. I don't know what it's like, but you get to be repurposed if you don't turn into a real live
Or
Pinocchio.
you can give us feedback if you recognize that you're an NPC turning into a living soul. Please contact us.
Yeah, absolutely. If you feel like, wow, I am an NPC and I feel like I'm transforming somehow, like, let us know what that is, because I'm curious if that theory, it's just a theory right now because it just came out yesterday out of the fringes imagination. But yeah, please give us
Out of the blue. Where does that word saying come from? Out of the blue.
Did you know that the color blue is the most rare color in nature, right? So when you see the blue morpho, the butterfly flying, like that's super rare, right? Yeah, the sky's blue, but is that nature or is that like the backdrop? I don't know.
That's actually one of the things that we can talk about, the synchronosis, the clues. Those clues, like the blue morpho flying in front of me when I'm deep in thought, for me is a confirmation that what I'm thinking about does have some validity to it. So.
Yeah, oh for sure. Yeah, all of these things, numbers, the 33, the 1111, bing, 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 bing.
These are all confirmations of a sim for me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you guys. Well, I'm excited for the next one. I'm already getting ready to figure out when we're gonna record the next one. Yeah. It's probably gonna be online though, because we're separating realities at this point. And then we could just do online. We just do over the internet recordings, which is totally fine. But yeah, 47 minutes. That's pretty good.
Much love.
Much love, and we're out.